It's Monday. It's Mark Pyers. And it's real talk. Today, looking for another way to ease my mind and help my living. It's real talk. It's the daily variety show, Mark Pyers Real Talk. I'm here to connect with you, to amplify your current state, and I'm here with you on day 610 in a row of the Mark Pyers Real Talk show. And I have a special episode for you this evening. Dr. Richard M. Fleming is back for the third trip around the world of our minds, essentially, because this COVID-19 is making us all crazy. So without further ado, let me head over and get Dr. Fleming on with us. Let's see. Dr. Fleming, let me know when you're with us. There he is. I see the awesome photo of you again, my friend. Hold on. Let me see if I could ask you to be part of the program again. Let's see if I can do that. How do I do that again? I think I have to click on here and ask you.
Ask me to join.
Here we go. That should be
Let's see. Should I?
Dr. Fleming. Oh, you know what? Hold on a second. I have to see what I did here. I have to switch up the screen. We're going to kick this back to that. Did we work here? 2 seconds. We had the same problem with Mary M yesterday for some reason, but we will get it back. There we go. I see you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So good to see you, Dr. Fleming. Crazy week we've had, huh?
Every week we have is a crazy week.
You know, that's accurate. Although this week I think is just kind of, for me, it took a really strange turn. I just have to ask a simple question to start off with. The information that everyone's saying came out quietly over the last week about the deaths and a strict number. We were talking about this for weeks. The strict number for just COVID deaths, what that number would be, and the rough tally is somewhere around 10,000 people just for COVID. Everybody else had some sort of comorbidity, if that's correct. And I just wanted to get your take on these numbers. And also, why did it take so long for them to tell us? I mean, I think I know why, but why do you think it took them so long to quantify the information?
I ask myself that daily when I want to know why my residents and students aren't giving me the information I asked for. Or people that are working in the lab, why did this take quite so long? When you have somebody who's a type A personality like me who holds Monday morning meetings to say what we're going to do and Friday afternoon meetings to say what have we done. So I ask myself that question a lot. I don't know why it took them so long. And I to be honest with you, I am, like many things, less impressed or concerned with those numbers than I am other things. Because here's what everybody's confusing. I think when most people look at this, they go, wait a minute, only 10,000 people died from COVID. That's not the message. That's not the message. The message is there's 186,000 people in the United States who have died with COVID. The message is why were 176,000 of them not properly treated to address the inflammation and blood clotting that killed them? That's the question. And then the other question is, on those 10,000 people that supposedly died, admittedly enough, I think most of us understand that this is a respiratory virus. It goes through your nose, and the first place it tends to land for the majority of people, although not everybody, are the lungs. And so to say that 10,000 people died with this virus in their lungs, essentially, a viral pneumonia. Okay, remembering that pneumonia means infection of the lungs. It doesn't tell you whether it's a virus or bacteria or something else. The question is, of those 10,000, how many of those, which is not in the data, how many of those were on a ventilator, which accounts for why they died, because the ventilator settings were not done correctly for people with ARDS, this inflammation of the lungs, resulting from the immune response to the virus infection. So we don't have a smaller number here. It's not that you say, gosh, if those people hadn't had comorbidities, they wouldn't be dead. Well, yeah, that's like saying the people who died in an airplane crash, had they not gotten on the airplane, they wouldn't be dead.
I did see some responses where people said, look, mostly everybody has something. Like, even if they don't know it, there's something that they could consider a risk. So, there's a very small group of people that you would consider to be completely, perfectly healthy, and like not one thing. And it's so more people are at risk than not, essentially, right?
Here's the two drive home messages. This was a virus that existed in nature that has been man manipulated or woman manipulated. I wasn't in the lab. Okay. Humans manipulated this. Mm-hmm. The apes didn't do it. The giraffes didn't do it.
It didn't happen.
The dogs didn't do it.
And it didn't happen naturally over time.
The bats didn't do it. This was something that inside a human lab was modified to increase its gain of function so it became more infective. Bingo, they got it. Okay, I think we can all agree. The numbers are showing that this virus spreads rapidly through human populations.
Yep.
Masks have not cut it down. We're all masked up, right? Most of us. And the numbers are still going up.
That's true.
So if the masks were stopping this, I don't know, my little brain says, then why are the numbers still going up? And it's not all the parties being held out here in LA. It's not even all the college students getting drunk at the bars during spring break. And the other thing it says is that we have gotten so bad, so lazy as a species, that we have allowed our weights to go up and all these diseases to occur that predispose us to dying when our immune system is activated. That's not a good thing. The government didn't do that to us. We did that to ourselves. Now, we can change that. And the irony here is that if people got their acts together, ate healthier, got their diseases under control, you can't do much about aging, but you can age healthily. I mean, I don't know if you know how old I am, and I'm not going to discuss it on the air, but, I would be considered to potentially be in one of those categories of concern.
Mm-hmm. And you're less concerned because, and I just want everybody to be clear about this, there is no cure for COVID-19. There's no cure. And a vaccine, as far as I'm concerned, based on our conversations here, will not work. Even if they find one, it won't be effective by the time that antibody response kicks in, you're already dealing with thrombosis. You're already dealing with some of the other effects. You need to start, I think Dr. Fleming said to me right away, is you need to hit this thing like day 1, day 2. You need to be on it, not day 4, day 5. So vaccine is day 4, day 5, and by then you're in trouble. So, anyway, carry on. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, and there are treatments for it. And I would argue there is already a cure for it, but we're not implementing the treatment. The cure is to treat the inflammothrombotic problem. And our bodies will do the rest. That's the cure. That's the treatment. It's not a magic bullet that kills the virus, because the virus isn't what's killing people. What's killing people is an immune system, a human immune system, in unhealthy humans.
Interesting. So the immune system's actually killing them in the response to the virus.
Exactly. Because again, remember I've said there's two basic groups of people that are dying from this. We have the immune naive or the immune deficient. So the very young are the people with deficiency diseases already that can't control their response.
Okay.
So their body's going to try, but it's not well regulated. It's out of whack. It doesn't work properly. It either hasn't been tuned up yet, or it just doesn't work because they have like an immune deficiency disease. And HIV is not the only thing that does that. Okay, so that category, or categories where we are daily responding to insults to our bodies, and we're already hyperactivated, hyperimmune, if you will. And our body is trying to keep things under control, and now we just tossed one more problem onto it. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And as I shared with you last time, it's not just COVID-19. The numbers now are showing that influenza is killing 12% of the people with heart attacks. So now it's kind of oops, and they're not even putting that together and going, gosh darn, that means there's an inflammothrombotic process. They're just stunned by the fact that they're seeing these deaths from heart disease and big blood clots in the lungs called pulmonary emboli. If you had a pulmonary emboli right now, Mark, while we're talking, if you had a massive pulmonary emboli right now, you would not make it to the hospital. You would die at home.
Wow.
Okay? And the number of massive pulmonary emboli in these COVID patients that are being shown up on autopsies is huge. Wow. It's not chance. This is, the bodies are reacting to it, but because it's either our bodies aren't developed yet or they're hyperactive because of our fault, we're the ones who've gotten fat. We're the ones who've gotten diabetic. We're the ones who've let high blood pressure run amok. We're the ones who've put ourselves at risk for diabetes. We've done all these things, okay? All they did, and I think that this is just, they didn't even see this coming. They gained the virus, gain of function, to see if it would be spread better, and they got a bonus win because of how bad we all are around the world as far as our health is concerned. It has nothing to do with blood type or any of that other nonsense. It is the inflammation that's going on in the bodies.
Interesting. So what is there a connection then? Because unless this is again like a political thing, but they say that there is a worse response in the minority population. And I'm not sure if you heard anything about that or if that's just, it could just be a media thing. Or is it a blood type thing? Is it something
I think no, it's not. I mean, it's not a blood type thing. That's all of that blood type stuff for diet and everything else is just absolute nonsense. Okay. I mean, we've only got 4 basic blood types, and you don't see 4 different groups of people running around. Okay, I mean, so you look at different groups of people, and they tend to have certain health problems. You look at African Americans or black people around the world, and they tend to be more prone to high blood pressure.
Interesting.
There are some interesting things about that, but some of it is also related to diet and the salt intake. Remember, I told you in medical school, I was involved with a sodium and hypertension study that we did, where we took people that had no hypertensive parents, we took people that had one hypertensive parent, and then we took people with both parents hypertensive. And then what we did, because we had the facilities at the University of Iowa, we had a research hospital, we brought them in, and for 1 week, they got milkshakes. Now, on one of those weeks, those milkshakes were loaded with salt. And then we had 4 or 5 weeks in between, and then they had another week where the milkshakes had no salt. And they might have gotten the no salt one to begin with, and then 5 or 6 weeks later got the lots of salt. And then we did nerve recordings to separate parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. We did kidney function. We did central venous pressures, basically to see how hypertensive these people would get. And the more hypertensive parents you had, the more sensitive you were to the salt, and the more swelling you would have, and that leads to kidney disease, which is another inflammatory problem. It leads to heart failure, which is another inflammatory problem. It leads to fluid accumulation, which makes you more prone to inflammatory problems. If you look at Native Americans and you look at Hispanics, they have a greater tendency to develop diabetes. Some of that may be genetic, but a lot of that is dietary.
Interesting.
Okay, it's great to go to a Mexican restaurant and order margaritas and have salty, high-fat foods that taste good. But the problem is that there's a price that you pay for doing this over and over and over again.
Makes sense.
And our bodies, remember when I first came out with this inflammation and cardiovascular disease theory in 1994, I said, look, the problem here for the blood vessels is that when you insult the body, which could be a virus, it could be a bacteria, it could be the foods you're eating, it could be the lack of nutritional values that you're getting that allow homocysteine in the immune system to run amok. It could be oxidative damage. It could be elevated fibrinogen because you don't get up and move around, or you have a kidney problem or a liver problem. If you have those things going on, and your body's immune system reacts to it and corrects it, that's great. But if you have those things going on day after day after day after day because of a society that doesn't walk around, doesn't exercise, overeats, smokes, has plenty of too much alcohol, okay, lots of salt in its diet, too much fat, you get the consequence that we have, and there's no recovery time for the body. It's always on go, and it's always geared up. And now you throw a virus on there that gears up the same system to get rid of the virus, like it's trying to get rid of the other garbage. That system doesn't stand a ghost of a chance of reining itself in and not causing blood clots, because the very way in which you treat this stuff, if you're the immune system, is you do shut the blood supply off to it by forming clots. So there's no blood, it dies. You do punch holes in things with chemicals that are designed to not only punch holes in the cells where the virus are infected, but it punches holes in the arteries of your body and causes inflammation and blood clot because of the damage, so that you don't bleed to death. So where they played it, and they being the people who manipulated with this virus, and they got their money's worth, and they proved that they could spread this, the message to the rest of us should be, A, when I go into the hospital, if I need to be there, I want the doctors treating the inflammation and the blood clotting so I won't die from it, and I'll live to get through this. And B, we need to be changing the way that we're living, because we've set ourselves up for it. So in some ways, we've only ourselves to blame. And in other ways, we've got somebody, we didn't ask for COVID-19.
Well, yeah, but you make a very good point. Sorry, go ahead, finish that, and then I want to add on.
No, but we set everything in motion to have a bad consequence. And it doesn't matter whether it's COVID-19 or influenza when it comes around every year, or some other thing that goes on, So
that was my tag along. Yeah, my tag along is that. So basically, what I find very interesting right now is the narrative has become, let's blame Donald Trump for the fact that this many people died. But really, there was it goes deeper than that. We as a society have become unhealthy over the last 30 years, 40 years, and it gets worse with the GMOs, all this stuff. Right now, we are in 2020 where we're unhealthy as a nation. We have more people overweight. Obesity is a huge issue in the United States. I think I've heard in the past that we are the most obese in the world. Is that correct? The United States?
I don't know if we are. I mean, if we're not, we're right up there in the running.
We're right up there. So if you look at the fact that our death rate, to your point, that we do know how to sort of respond to this thing now and to treat the symptoms, our death rate is one of the lowest in the world, considering we have the highest comorbidities in the world with all these fat people walking around, etc. So in a way, we've done this to ourselves, like you said. It's not like you could blame one person for the reaction in this country. It's the way we've treated our bodies up to this point. And then we've had 9 months of nobody up above telling us to boost our immune systems. Just throw a mask on, guys, and go in your basement.
And the truth is, boosting our immune system may not be what we need to be doing, because remember, we've got it geared up so much that the problem is controlling our immune system. We have really got to step back and look at this. Okay, and I'm going to say this again about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a physician. He's not a scientist. If you saw the one thing one of the 3 things I posted today on YouTube is, just because you can read, or just because somebody fills you in on something and you can regurgitate it back, does not make you a scientist.
I love that.
Just because you can go read something and talk about it, that's not research. That's reading.
Yeah, I love that. The difference between a journalist and a scientist. Why don't you tell everybody because you broke it down perfectly in this message.
Well, no, the problem is that, you've got everybody, whether they're just reading on Google, or they're a journalist reading on Google, or going to a press conference with the president every day, or listening to Fauci, or listening to everybody else, and you're listening to us, the scientists, talk. I used to have somebody used to say they're not a doctor, but they sit next to one on TV when I would be doing an interview with them, which is like, yeah, which means you're not a doctor. Okay, it's not like it's osmotically flowing from me to you.
Yeah, that's true.
You're not a scientist. I've got 52 years worth of research. So when you're reading something, the first thing you learn as a student, students moan and groan about this, but when you really get into being a researcher, the first thing that happens is your advisor or whoever's you're working in their lab, they will say, we're working on this project, so you need to go read up on this. Now, in my era, like I said in the dark ages, we went to something called a library, and we went to a card index, and we looked up topics, and then we went and looked through all the journals, and it took a while to find the journal, and then you had to find the paper, and then you had to look through the journals, and they had references, because scientists like me write things with references, which means once I've put it in as a reference, I'm no longer responsible for teaching you about it. It's your job to go read the reference, then the other papers. Yeah. That's why I put them there, to make my case for the paper that I just published. So when you go and read something and you find out the facts, okay, COVID-19 is a single-stranded RNA positive sense virus. It infects using a spike protein. Okay, Junior, you went and you learned that. Now, is that research? No, you went and read something. Does that make you an expert in COVID-19? No, right? Does it make you an expert on spike protein? No. I mean, Kaufman can't even identify the difference between a spike protein and a virus. And he's got an MD out there terraining it around, trying to tell people that, the model that they show you on television of what coronavirus looks like, that the spike protein is really the virus, and that the big gray ball is the cell that it's infecting. I mean, he doesn't even know the difference between the spike protein and the bloody virus. Okay, so not a scientist. This does not make. So you go and you get your background stuff. And that background stuff forms the first part of any scientific paper that you try to publish. And guess what it's called? Background. Okay? This is the reason why you should want to read my research, is because there's an interesting thought about what we learned. And now we actually did a study to try to answer that question. And then you read through the methods. And so once you have enough background, which is to teach you the language, and just because you can rattle off the language does not now make you a scientist or a researcher. It doesn't make you a doctor because you can say zithromycin. Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, it doesn't do that, okay? And then what a scientist does is they say, okay, well, I wonder, and let's just use COVID-19 because I'll just walk you through my process. Okay, if I know what I know about COVID-19, this is a virus that attaches to cells either by an S protein or by sialic acid, or quite possibly through another cholinergic site that can then be taken up into the cells. And it also has an effect on carcinoembryonic antigen sites and some other sites. So I know that's how it attaches. I know that viruses get inside cells. They use the ribosomes inside cells once the capsule comes off to let their genetic material out, and it uses the cellular ribosomes to reproduce itself, and then the Golgi apparatus to put itself back into a package after it's made all of the necessary proteins. It gets reassembled, and then it leaves the body in a cytoplasmic vacuum that merges with the cell membrane and releases all the particles out. Okay, now I know all those steps are there. Now my question is, what do I know about treating each and every one of those steps where it's doing something? That's how you attack a virus. And then you say, what drugs do that? What information do we know? And if you're floundering around like the vast majority of people are, and you don't know what the heck hydroxychloroquine is, or primaquine is, or zinc is, or zithromycin, and it's obvious that most people don't know what the zithromycin really does. You're chuckling, which I'm guessing you're reading posts, but I can't see them.
I heard you say. I heard you say about zinc, and I was just thinking about Mary Ann, who you're going to be interviewed by tomorrow. She put a post up yesterday about how Fauci couldn't even say the word zinc. He's like, that thing you talked about. He goes, some people say it works. It makes them. He's like, make like they're crazy for zinc. Like,
yeah.
And she was making a point, And
I know, I saw it. It was embarrassing enough to watch. Okay.
So I just had a chuckle about that.
Because what does a scientist physician like myself get? Well, why did Fauci do that? And it's like, I don't know why Fauci. Look, I know what he's doing. He's trying to say that's crazy. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to get past second grade to know that.
Yeah.
The problem is that we've got somebody who's 70 some years old and he's talking like this on something that's killing hundreds of thousands of people. And one of the things we've not talked about, but is key, is interferon. Interferon gets its name because it interferes with viral replication. Still there? Yeah. So it's interferon, but you have to use that early on, and it is in the protocol that I developed because it's one of the things to consider. It's another way of interfering with the virus replicating itself. Look, if the virus can't get in, if the virus can't replicate, then it can't get enough of it to get an immune response. So your first let me go get this thing is to think in those terms. But when you see people dying, and we're doing a massive study, if you know anything about me and my beautiful type A obsessive compulsive behavior, I'm thinking, what are all the steps? Because I'm going to target every one of these suckers from day one, and we're going to see what works and what doesn't work. I'm not going to spend 4 to 5 months doing one and go, well, that didn't work, or it didn't work as well. Well, that, during that same 4 to 5 months, we could have been checking the other, because it's not like we had a paucity of patients, is it?
Yeah.
Huh? We had enough people. So
enough, 6 million.
Then you ask the questions, how do you treat the oxygenation status? I mean, why is nobody saying, let's give the drugs that we normally would give to open airways for people when they're having breathing problems? I've got it in my protocol. Why the heck isn't it in anybody else's protocol? Duh. Nebulizer treatment for the people in the hospital, right? Not one that increases their heart rate, because we've already realized that it's the airways we want to increase, not the heart rate, number one. And number two, we have other drugs that might cause problems with the heart, so why add insult to injury? If you think it through, you realize which drug you want. If you don't think it through, well, I don't know, it's one of those drugs.
Well, and I think you said something really interesting last time, is you said you never want to be a doctor learning in the moment about something like COVID-19, where you're figuring it out in real time. You want to be prepared and have been trained in some way, and this is why we lost a lot of lives up front, and why we've seen a shift, and something like 10,000 lives per million as opposed to 120,000 lives per million.
Yeah, you don't want, the purpose of going to medical school is to be educated. And when, and I'm always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. But when I have people giving lip service and saying, we know about inflammation and cardiovascular disease, then my response is going to be, well, if you know about my theory, then why aren't you applying my theory?
Yeah, that's very true.
Look, if you don't know it, I got it. You should have, to get your degree. But, let's presume I'm not important enough for you to be reading on. Now I am.
Absolutely.
Go read the dang thing, okay? Get caught up on it. I mean, I'm knocking myself out here to try to explain to these people, this is what you need to do. And the only way this is going to get addressed appropriately is to recognize the facts involved. If you start the whole conversation with viruses aren't real, well, you look so stupid to the people that know that they are, particularly if those people were involved in the development of this virus. They're not going to take you seriously. You are a laughing joke, and all you have done is led people down, as people like to say, down the rabbit hole of misinformation. And how are you going to back that one out? How are you going to then become credible to the point that somebody says, well, maybe something else you have to say is valid?
Yeah.
When the hypothesis is that bacteria come out of red blood cells, Oh my God. Red blood cells are the only cells in the human body that don't have nuclear material. They don't have any genes. They don't have anything to make anything with. They only have hemoglobin with iron and oxygen to carry it back and forth. They don't have anything to make viruses and bacteria out of. And if you went to medical school and you're still dumb to that concept, you need to get out of the field of practicing medicine because you are a danger to patients.
Makes sense.
So if you're telling people that viruses don't exist, you are not the person to help get people's civil rights back or get this under control, because you can't give a treatment for something you don't recognize exists. And when your argument that viruses don't exist is the use of a bacteriophage in your examples, which is a virus that infects bacteria, when your argument that viruses don't exist is to use a virus to show that they don't exist, that's like taking a Ford, to show that cars don't exist, okay? I mean, it's just retarded.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
And we have to get past, I know people are catching that my tone is changing, but this is month 8. We're at the end of month 8. Tomorrow starts month 9, September.
Yeah.
Okay? We have killed enough people.
And the problem I have here, I wanted to ask you two things. First and foremost, Fraud G was on with Matthew McConaughey. I don't know if you saw this.
No, I saw bits and pieces, but not the whole thing.
So the only part that I thought was very intriguing is he said that if he has a 50 to 70% efficacy connection with people out there, he'd be happy with that. And I just question if it's if 99%, somewhere around 97, even if it's 98% of people survive, and 50 to 70% of people would benefit from a vaccine that you and I think, realize would never work even if it did connect. It's just the same thing as whether you had it or not, I feel like. The virus, I don't know. It's just the way I hear you speaking. I don't know if that's true. But I just question all of this. Why even push a vaccine? There's one more tag along here, and I got freaked out by this. This is probably totally conspiracy theory hogwash. I'm an inventor, you're an inventor, and I'm curious about something. I have a patent, okay? You have patents. I read something that scared me, and I don't think it's true, but they said if everybody takes this Bill Gates RNA patent, we become his patented product. I think that's crazy, but they said then he could do anything he wants with us because we're no longer humans. We've actually been modified. I think it's totally nuts. I see you laughing, so I think I know the answer, but I just want to ask a doctor and also another patent holder, because as a patent holder, it sounded totally nuts, but I just figured, well, we'll ask Dr. Fleming tonight.
Well, the first thought is that if Bill Gates is trying to own the human population, he's really down, he's dumbing his things that he owns down.
He's going backwards.
So all Mr. Gates could own is whatever genetic material he thinks is new that doesn't exist in nature. Okay, so here's an argument for you. This virus has been altered by humans, right? Mm-hmm. It's been altered with HIV, and it's been altered with rabies, and God knows what else. Well, rabies is naturally occurring, and HIV is naturally occurring, and coronavirus is naturally occurring. So this is when I put my lawyer hat on. I knew there was a reason for getting that degree. And I would argue, well, all three of these are naturally occurring. Therefore, I don't think that this person should be allowed to get a patent for three things that are naturally occurring that are now just put together.
Interesting. Okay. That's true, because it's three parts put into one. They already existed previously.
I mean, that would be my argument. I don't know. It's always up to the judge, right? Because it's never a matter of whether it's right or wrong. It's just whatever the guy in the black robe seems to think. And for that reason, I think they should really only. I think judges should have to have a set period of time that they're a judge, and then kick them off.
Is the big question, because again, a patent, the whole idea here is my product is something I could sell, okay, and that's why I got a patent for it, and so is yours. If someone, your formula, If someone wants to, these are things that have a value because you can sell them. The end game of this, they got a patent for something because they wanted to be able to get it out there to sell a patent to a vaccine?
The end game to this, I think, and again, I'm not in his brain, thank God. I like some clarity of thought, is that it's a product that you need. And, if humanity has taught me anything, the vast majority of what people make anymore, they make so it will break and need to constantly be replaced.
Very true.
Well, this is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy with vaccines, because these suckers can't even keep an antibody response for 2 to 3 months. So if you can convince people
to keep taking the vaccine,
you now have a product that they need. We have a system where you can't be sued if you're a vaccine developer, which undoubtedly must have had somebody's personal fingerprints all over it, where somebody got paid off for something, because just naturally, if you're a lawmaker, if you're one of those lawyers that's in Congress or, Senate or House of Representatives, and you're signing off on these bills, somewhere in the back of your brain, I would hope it would dawn on you, but I know it doesn't. I would hope it would dawn on you that, wait a minute, what if it's a family member or somebody I care about who gets harmed? Well, maybe this isn't such a good thing, but it's amazing what happens in closed door rooms.
Yeah. Start weighing out what the benefits as opposed to the lives lost.
to society. So, I don't know.
I tend
you
to
would
think
have to have, like the Oxford vaccine, where you are injecting genetic material into a cell, and you would have to have a reverse transcriptase mechanism, of which HIV does that, to set that material into the human DNA to get the human DNA to reproduce it. Now, the human DNA system is pretty sophisticated in that it's constantly checking. The polymerase systems that are constantly laying in the new nucleotides are also constantly checking for error codes in the 4 nucleotides, the cytosine guanine, the adenine thymine, and because they're 3 bonds and 2 bonds, hydrogen bonds. So if they disconnect and they do a 3 bond with a 2 bond, it's not going to be structurally right, and it's going to show a bulge, and it's going to be caught, and it's probably going to get corrected. So let's be honest, I don't think Bill Gates is smart enough to come up with something like that, but he probably pays people that are smart enough to be working on it, and they've clearly been doing something now for almost 20 years on this particular coronavirus, 18 years on this particular coronavirus. So they've spent some time and effort. Somebody has. I don't think it's clearly just him. But, no, I don't think he would be able to claim that we're all his property, okay?
Even though you just said he'd be able to claim any new material that never existed naturally. And
but see, the rest of the material he wouldn't be able to claim, and so we are naturally existing. Until we can't naturally exist without the replication provided by that, you wouldn't have that argument. And I heard your other argument about the sterility thing, and I don't think that's. You don't think it's really sterile? I dismissed that. No.
Okay, so you don't think that's actually the vaccines that it's the intention would be to fertilize.
Look, if I wanted to make you sterile, I'd just put you through radiation that you didn't know about, and I'm not going to go into some of the theories that people have. I would do it simply old-fashioned with school.
So
I've had more radiation than most people in their lifetime will ever have, and not glow in the dark, and I'm still fertile.
And you think in general, if they wanted to take the end game of that, where they're going to try to reduce the population going forward, people have less children, that they could do it with radiation or some other forms?
I don't think they need to do that anymore, because the reality is, because humanity has done such a poor job of taking care of itself, they just accomplished that with COVID-19. Even though I don't think that was their end game, they're probably sitting there going, this really turned out better than we thought. And I don't think they've put the inflammothrombotic part together unless they've been listening to what I've been saying, because it's clear that the researchers haven't yet.
Yeah. Well, I also think what's interesting, and I wanted to get your take on this, is we've all heard that Governor Cuomo really, screwed the pooch. He put all these sick patients in with the nursing homes when the president sent him a ship. He could have just sent them there. But regardless of that, I started hearing some other stories around the world. Ireland, Germany, where they did the same thing. They put sick people into the nursing homes. And I'm thinking to myself, I know October 2019, they had this whole, this get-together in New York City.
Right.
What was it called again?
Laid it out.
Something 21, whatever it was. So they got together to do this, and was one of the things they discussed that, hey, what we would probably do is we, as a globe, let's just put the sick people and let's kill as many old people as possible. It just seems weird to me that Cuomo did something that Ireland did and then Germany did. Like, did they talk about this? And Cuomo's the only guy who got caught. I wonder if every state you went into, or maybe every Democrat state, I don't know, but every state you went into, and if you looked into the nursing home situations, were they sending the sick people in order to build up this number to create the fear around the world? This is a worldwide thing. It just seems very odd to me that they did the same thing in Ireland. When I heard them say that, I was like, "Oh, wait a second."
And I understand where you're coming with that. My perspective is people are not nearly as smart as you give them credit for.
You don't think they would have had a strategy when they did this in October? That would have been one of the thoughts. Is like,
I think
take advantage of it while you got it.
I don't think originally. I think it's potential that they might have seen the consequences and went, "Huh." But, I think that's what the vast majority of people do. They don't think through the consequences of what they do. And then something happens, and it usually has to slap them in the head really hard. And then they go, huh. So I think Cuomo got the message on the nursing homes when they started talking about it in the news media with all the people going in the nursing homes and dying.
Yeah.
They did that here in LA too.
They did it in LA too?
Yeah.
So then again, this is what I'm thinking. And again, I know you don't like to speculate.
It's a dumping ground.
It's a dumping ground. Yeah, and that's when going back to and again, I know you're not a speculation type of guy. You like to look at the facts, but I think for years they've been talking about how the older population is living a lot longer. They used to die, and now they're drugs, whatever it is, but people are living. Now they've got this large population, baby boomer population. It just seems like it's pretty much something that I could see them planning over time. And then, hey, whenever that virus hits, look, this is game plan. Is step 1, 2, or 3 is we got to put all the people in there. Let's get as many of them out of the way as possible. Builds up the fear mongering. We're all walking around for the first 9 months here saying, geez. And again, I know your response is correct. Just because 10,000 people died strictly and all these other people, it's because as a nation we are obese. That being said, we've all been walking around the nation for months now thinking that this thing is, we're all dying if we get it. And the facts are, if the symptoms are treated, and if they said this to us from the beginning, then we'd actually be okay. And maybe even those 10,000 people would have been okay if they treated the symptoms.
That's why I raised the issue that those 10,000 or so people, 10, 11,000 people, I can't, maybe you can, find the data on how many of those were on ventilators and not.
That would be a great stat to know. Because I know you're right. That's what I've heard is the ventilators are only killing people. It's the one thing I wish Trump would stop talking about, how we have so many ventilators. I'm like, look, I know you got ventilators that are killing people.
They told him they were needed. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah, they pushed on that thing, and they were like, we don't have enough ventilators.
What he should not now be doing is pushing the vaccine stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the problem, and this is the problem for his situation. They hate him so much that he's always behind the ball. Like I was watching today, these reporters are so horrible. Like I think about if Sleep Sofa Joe does get into office, the questions they're going to give him. Hey Joe, what'd you have for dinner last night? They're so mean to this guy, and the way he responds, I'm actually kind of surprised he's not more of a jerk to them. I totally understand why over the last 4 years he slapped back. I wouldn't be able to stand it. These people are the worst human beings to him. And even the way they ask questions, like we all can intimate, we can feel energy, and the way they throw energy at this guy and the questions, I just feel bad. I'm like, whether I liked him or not, I think they've given him such a bad rap for being the outsider. And if you look at everything he's done, I keep saying this, everything he did was very liberal. Everything he did over the last 4 years is very liberal. He took care of the black communities. He started inner city business centers to give people opportunities. I mean, this is something that the Democrats should be doing, never did before. HBC is just, I can go down the list. I look at it. He hired 5 openly gay people in his cabinet. That's never been done in the history of time. That's something a liberal would do. And now it's like forced on him. I'll hire a black woman to be my VP. But I just find it very interesting that he's just gotten this push down. And you're right. He can't say anything right. No matter what he says, he's in the wrong here. So he should just stop talking until after the election at this point, because no one's going to give him a chance.
I think he feels that he has to come up with something that will get him reelected.
Yeah, you're right.
And unfortunately, my perspective is it's better to not be reelected and tell the truth than to have to lie to get reelected, because you have to live with that lie.
Yep,
and I'm apolitical. I am truly independent. I am originally from Iowa. I think we have more independence than most states.
Really?
And that's because we don't need to be told how to think. We're actually pretty smart people, and we can figure it out on our own.
You see through it all. I like that.
Running a farm is not only running a business, but it is running computers, and it's running fairly sophisticated equipment, and it's dealing with longer working hours, and there's a lot of advantages, but it's not an easy thing to do. And it takes very intelligent people to do that, and to do that properly. We had a president of the United States who, when he was elected, said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Why didn't he get elected a second term? Because he turned around and raised taxes. Now, what he should have done is, and he kind of did it, but he didn't do it the way I would have done it, which doesn't mean the way I do it is right. Although, God might disagree. Anyway, joke aside, I would have said, look, my belief was we did not need to raise new taxes. I got in here. I saw the disaster that was here. We had to do something to address this. The only option I had was to raise taxes. So I did what was right for the American people and raised taxes. That did not get him reelected. Okay, better to tell the truth and not get reelected. And then the American people have to live with the consequences of the decisions that they make. This semi-free society is only semi-free to the extent that you want to participate in it. That's one of the limiting factors. And we've had this discussion about Greece and the difference between a democracy and a republic. But
I just find it interesting because this election is so high stakes at this point that my job now is a comedian, because I consider myself a comedian and more of an entertainer. And
well, you make me laugh.
Yeah, and that's I want people to break away from all this negativity. So, I love having you on. I love having Marianne on, Charles Pixley, anybody who wants to come on this program and speak. I love it, because to me, I'm here to entertain this world, and you help me do that. But what I find is very interesting is when I hear Sleep Sofa, because I call him the Sleep Sofa, and when I watch him, he just says whatever the hell he wants to win. And it's all lies. He says it's going to be free college. And I'm like, he sounds like Bernie Sanders just to get the votes. And we know the moment he gets in, he turns around and lies. Oh, sorry, we can't do free college. And then also this whole idea they're going to defund the police. It's a lot of crazy left-wing stuff. And then they get on stage and say it's the right-wingers that are out there doing all. It baffles me how the lying takes place. And I look, I know that there's lying on both sides, so it's not that. But the idea that this country's been on fire for 4 months, and Joe Biden went out there today and told the world it's the right wing that's doing this. It doesn't even make sense. The people that like Trump and like this country as free and for people to have free speech are out there pulling down statues. And the ones I see kicking white people in the head and yelling, "I'm going to go get mine." It's so ridiculous. And so that's why I really get frustrated, because we can't be happy. We can't find any sort of happiness when people are straight up lying to us in order to win. And I know what you're saying. Like, Trump should just say, look, it's this, and this. Vote for me or don't vote for me. This guy's a sleep sofa. And if you want to vote for him, that's great. And if he doesn't win, I just fear a world with Joe Biden at the head, because he's just going to be a puppet. They're just going to, he can't even, that's what I really fear. And I know it sounds weird, but I
think the president of the United States, if he's going to make comments about COVID-19, needs to get valid information from people that really know what they're doing. And it's clear that when I listen to the people at the agencies answer questions, they dodge a lot of questions and say, well, that's really not my agency, that's their agency over there. And then you go over there and say, well, but we really don't do that, they do that. So there's a lot of passing the blame going on, but in the end, you really have to, as a scientist and as a physician, you have to look at this and say, what are my responsibilities here? And my responsibility is to, as a researcher, is to find out what the facts are and to not play favorites. I don't care which drugs work and which ones don't. I'd like to see something work, and I think we have demonstrated that, at least early enough to I have sent in a paper suggesting a treatment sequence from very beginning to the worst case scenario.
Is this the one you sent me earlier?
No, what I sent you yesterday was something that's in the book that really just looks at a number of the drugs and how they work at these different stages in the process of COVID-19.
Okay.
It was used to formulate, that's the background stuff of a paper, not the research. That's something now that you can all read, and you will have read it, but it doesn't make you a scientist.
I see. I'm going to see if I can save it and pull it up for everybody to look at real quick. And I wanted to know if you could explain one thing to me, because I'm not familiar with what this means, terrain theory. What is that exactly? Terrain
theory? Well, terrain theory is the theory that viruses don't exist. If I understand them correctly, it is the terrain, your body, that determines how your body responds, okay? And so they talk an awful lot about toxins. Well, that's not terrain theory, that's toxicology. There's an entire science built around toxicology by people who spend their 7 years to get their PhD in toxicology. Exosomes, methods of communicating between cells in one part of the body to another area of the body. Just like there's chemicals, there's also fluid-filled packages of material that's released from cells to go communicate with other cells. Well, that's not terrain theory. That's exosome theory, and that's part of the study of various studies, depending upon where you're at, I think, into which group of individuals are working on that. But they would view themselves as specialists in exosomes, not terrain theory. So coming up with a theory that somebody came up with more than 100 years ago that says, well, it's just how well your body is that determines whether you get ill. Well, okay, generally that's kind of a fluff statement that makes you feel good like a bunny, because it's cute and it's cuddly and you can, feed it carrots. And we all know that, if your body's unhealthy, you're not going to deal very well with things. And if your body is healthier, it probably deals better with things. But that doesn't explain diddly squat. That's a generalist statement, and that's not a theory. A theory is something that you put it together and it explains something. And so when you have viruses that come in and they activate the immune system, that's a theory. That is, there's really viruses. You can really see them on electron microscopes. You can't see them on a Rife microscope that uses light because light's too big to see something as small as a virus. So it just violates the physics. So that's stupid. I mean, just because you put magnifying lenses on it, that allows you to see further, but not something smaller. Big difference. But you can try to hoodwink that by people and then say it's not the viruses, it's all the toxins in the air. Well, in Los Angeles during early parts of COVID-19, when the COVID cases were going up, guess what was going on to the air quality? It was improving because nobody was out driving. Yeah. So if it was the air toxicity that was producing the problem, then the cases should have gone down if it was just toxic air. Okay? Exosomes aren't viruses. The genetic material that they may exchange from one part of the body to another is not the same genetic material as COVID-19. How do we know that? Because real scientists have genotyped COVID-19 and they've genotyped human beings, and they're not the same thing. And this nonsense a week ago that, oh my goodness, the thing that they're using in PCR tests is really the same thing as chromosome 8. No, you got that, back asswards. It was a reverse primer, and so it was exactly the opposite of what you were reading in chromosome 8. So this grasping at straws to say there's no such thing as viruses. There's, and that viruses and bacteria and yeast all come out of red blood cells, which then says there is such a thing as these things. It's the using a virus to prove viruses don't exist. Terrain wants to pretend that it has nothing to do with infectious disease. Oh my goodness, there's an entire field built around that, we use things that are naturally occurring, in some fungi to prevent organ rejection when we transplant organs. That's not fantasy land. That's germ theory. It's just a fungus, okay? So to say that viruses and bacteria and that stuff don't exist is what terrain theory does. There's not anything behind it. And when you push these people to give me proof about terrain theory, they go, well, we really don't have the types of studies that we should have because nobody will fund it. Well, guess what? Nobody funded my inflammation and cardiovascular disease theory either. Nobody funds your stuff up front. You have to actually do something to demonstrate that what you're talking about isn't just hot air before somebody will throw their hard-earned money at it to try to make a difference. So
makes sense.
Guess what having none of that money means? It means you haven't done anything to suggest to anybody who has money to spend that you're worth spending money on, and there's no reason or benefit for them to waste their money on microscopes that don't do what you say they do, and for people who can't understand the difference between a virus and a spike protein attached. He doesn't even, his first thought was that COVID-19 meant it was the 19th coronavirus. No, it's because it was discovered in 2019, you moron.
Oh, my goodness. I know. Look, the problem, and this is why you posted today, is everybody's become an expert based on hearing one report, based on me having Dr. Fleming. Oh, I heard Dr. Fleming said. So you're right. Everybody gets these, they get their chest all puffed out. Oh, I heard this great thing, and this is the truth. 10,000 people. It's not an accurate way to go about. Really, that we need to have some sort of hierarchy when it comes to accurate information. We just don't have it anymore. No one trusts what they're hearing from the CDC, from the WHO. I watched today the WHO, you probably saw this, WHO had a meeting about coronavirus. And I didn't see anybody asking any questions about these things we're talking about. They were talking about, and this is because you heard Newsweek, because you heard Politico, they're asking questions that continue to stoke the fire instead of talking about the thrombosis or talking about treating the symptoms. And I just wonder if it's going to change on November 4th, if you're going to start hearing, hey, look, you know what, we're going to start treating this. The narrative seems very blasé. Like, okay, look, you guys got to keep doing what you're doing. Well, what are we doing? What are we doing? Everybody's just going to run in different directions.
They're grasping at straws right now. But it is interesting to see there in the scientific literature, there's more comments about inflammation. And my response is, duh, you think? You know?
Because that's the problem.
Like, I don't know why I wasted, the last 26 years.
And you sent me, so what you sent me here was actually, I think I want to ask you because I think this is your newest.
Am I going to get to see this?
Yeah, this is up on the screen now. Treating COVID-19 and inflammothrombotic response. So this is talking about using FMTV DM. So I think this is your.
Can you share the screen? I'm going to try to.
Are you on YouTube
with
me?
You are.
Are you on the YouTube page?
It
should be live. If you go to the YouTube page, you'll see it right now.
Live
it's on.
now.
Yeah, there you go. And right on the screen, I have it. Is that the one?
Oops. Are you there?
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you, and I can see this. Yes, this is background stuff. So this is this is in the book.
Okay.
Which hopefully I'll hear soon here in the next week or two who's going to publish it. But you remember we've talked about 4 separate issues to address this infection, and they're not laid out in sequence here. That wasn't an accident. I decided to switch them around because I think people get too mesmerized when they see things in order all the time. And I want people to start paying attention to the concepts as opposed to being baby stepped through it every time. So on the far right is the column that says decrease COVID-19 entry into cells and replication. That's actually the first step. But I switched it up so you have to start paying attention to what you're reading. Okay? Otherwise, you're not going to get it. And once I've got you to pay attention, now I stand a ghost of a chance of getting you to learn. So all the things that are in the protocol, and I don't see all of it. So can you push it up on the screen a little bit more?
Let me see. Is that not the whole thing?
No, there's a little bit. There's a line or two on the bottom that's not showing up.
Huh. Let's see. That should be that's at least what I'm getting on that picture. Maybe there's another one.
I'm going to pull my screenshot up here. I'm going to try something and let me know if this works because I've been playing around a little bit more with my presentations. So let me know if I'm going to share my screen.
Let's see if this
works.
works.
And I'm going to be dependent upon you to tell me if it worked. Okay. Post disabling attending screen sharing. Whoops. Let's see here.
Let's see what happens. I still see you now.
Okay, so it says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh, let me go over to the Zoom screen and see what this is saying.
Right.
Oh, you need me to disable the screen sharing?
No, it says that you already have.
Oh, so you need me to allow it. Hold on a second.
Right. I want to share my screen.
Okay, here we go. So that should work now.
And just a second. And share.
I got your screen.
Can you see it? Okay, perfect.
Oh, wait.
All right, so
hold on a second. Actually, I don't have the screen yet. Let me see if I could find you because it says you are now it's a black screen. Let me just see if I think I have to move the I may have to move it in order to find you. Let me just see if I can figure this out.
Okay.
Well, that's weird. It's just a black screen now. Let me go back to you. Oh, let's see if that worked. Oh, you know what it is? This went really I think that may be difficult to do because the screen is massive. Let me see. Let me pull up what you got over here. Oh, I see what you're saying. Wait, I think I have that same exact. I thought that's the picture you sent me. Hold on one second.
It is, but you can see if you look at the bottom of what I was sharing, there's more information like on interferon and that.
Okay, let me see. Okay, I'm kind of moving it. You know what it is? It's screwing up the rest of the screen. Can you see if you could send me that one in Twitter, and I'll just pull it right up.
Yep. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, let's get you back on the screen. I'll make sure I get you looking right.
So everybody can see me. Let's see here.
Yeah, there we go.
So here is...
There we go. That's good. All right, so let me grab this picture and pull up the correct one.
Right.
I think it just came through now.
Just that you had part of it cut off on the bottom.
All right, let's see. Let's do it. This one.
There will be a test.
There will be a test at the end, people. All right, here we go. Let's get this open here. Let's see what we got. I'm not sure. This doesn't look much different to me, but tell me if you see
it's the same, but you're missing the bottom.
Oh, I see. Interferon alpha 2b.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Do you see that now? Is it good?
Well, I don't see it on what I've got from YouTube. That's why I'm trying to.
All right, it should be coming up any second now.
Yeah, see, mine stops at that line where it says clindamycin inhibits protein translation. And I'm looking for you to just pull that up a little bit more. So
I wonder what click on that YouTube screen. Make sure you click the live button because I'm looking at it. It looks like it's already been updated. Click on the live on YouTube. See if it's maybe behind.
Okay, so
because I updated the shot. It looks like I could see interferon alpha B2 or alpha 2B as the bottom line on my screen. Let me know if you see that too. I know sometimes I'll push a button. And
okay, I can see it just on the very bottom. Okay,
cool.
Good enough. It's kind of like classroom. If you wait too long, you lose the students.
Exactly.
So, or they fall asleep, or they start daydreaming about what their next date's going to be, or where they're going. But not today. Today they're dreaming about where they're not going to go. Okay, because we live in a new society that's afraid to go outside, and
the new normal, Dr. Fleming. It's the new normal, apparently, that we're supposed to just accept.
Well, you know me. I've always been one to go along with the crowd.
You and me both.
Okay, so on the far right-hand column, you see decreased COVID entry and replication into cells. So these are the different treatments that we have in the protocol that are available that will interfere either with the attachment of the virus to the cell, or to bring it inside of the cell and begin the replication process. And the things that we have are, you see, Primaquine is the first one, which is also an anti-malarial drug. It's not the fact that it's anti-malarial, it's that it's been shown to work for certain viruses. It inhibits their ability to reproduce themselves. Hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine have been shown to do that too. They've been shown to also interfere with the attachment of the virus at the ACE2 binding site, as well as replication once it's inside. Hydroxychloroquine has also been shown to be a zinc ionophore. I don't have in here about the 2B3A.
I'll try to make it a little bigger.
It might be in one of the other places. I'll see when we walk through it. And then zinc, because it can actually interfere with the ACE receptor, something we haven't talked about before. But it's also intimately involved with the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. And just for educational purposes, everything has an RNA or a DNA, and then that's dependent. So it's what you're starting with, and we're starting with RNA.
Okay.
So the RNA is dependent upon a polymerase for RNA. So the first RNA says what you're starting with, the second RNA says what you're ending with. So this could be a DNA-dependent DNA polymerase, and that would be DNA being reproduced with DNA polymerase. So there's a reason why those are there. Azithromycin, we talk about that. You've all heard about that, but also the antibiotics doxycycline and clindamycin work in the very, very similar ways, and they've been tested somewhat. Remdesivir is really an interfering agent with the replication of this polymerase. And then interferon alpha also interferes with the viral replication. So every one of those, and you're not hearing about these, you're hearing about bits and pieces of them. Every one of these has been shown, or I wouldn't have put them, they wouldn't be in my background material for a research study, have been shown to be effective on viruses. Different viruses, but that's what COVID-19 is. The second thing that we talk about is way to the far left side, and that's the oxygenation of the patient. And so, if the patient is not getting the oxygen that they need in their body, there's a variety of reasons for that. But, it's a matter of you can either give them supplemental oxygen. I mean, we don't take you from being in the street to shoving a tube down your throat unless you have something that's completely stopped your breathing. And then by all means we do. But you get supplemental oxygen, you can put them on their stomach, prone positioning. You need to consider the ventilator settings. If you do put them on a ventilator, there's venous to venous ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, which is just a fancy way of saying we take the blood out by a vein, oxygenate it. Oh, that's nice. That's a picture of you. And then put it back into your body by another vein. There you go.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
That's if you just have lung problems. VA ECMO is if you have heart and lung problems. So it's you taking it out of the vein and putting it back in an artery, bypassing the heart. Then there's the bronchodilators I talked about earlier. The drugs we normally use to improve breathing in emphysema patients and asthmatic patients and people who need to open their airways. There's methylprednisolone, which helps also with the airway to stimulate airflow through the receptors, beta-2 receptors, and decreases the buildup of inflammatory material in the airways. And then there's losartan, which may possibly, there's some evidence that this ARB, this angiotensin receptor blocker, has been successful in some treatment of individuals with ARDS. You don't hear about that, but it's been published. The research is solid, and so it's part of the research protocol. And the next step you have to be aware of is the enhanced rapid onset, the second column, innate T-cell cytotoxic immune response. And the things to be aware of is to make sure there's adequate support with the vitamins and minerals that are responsible for that system to function. And that includes things like B9, B6, B12, vitamin C, vitamin D3. Magnesium is important. And zinc is also important in that process. So zinc isn't just to interfere with the virus replication, it's also a necessary component for the immune function if it's going to function well. There's hydroxychloroquine has an effect on that first part by changing the pH slightly. This is never these massive numbers that they lead you to believe that says, oh, the acidification of this person's body makes them ill. No, we're designed to deal with acids. It's the bases, the alkaline that we're not designed with. Throw a little bit extra bleach in somebody's body and you've got a dead body. And that helps to prevent the virus from getting the capsule off from around itself, releasing its genetic material into our cells to replicate. And then tocilizumab, which is an interleukin-6 inhibitor. And then there's also other interleukin-6 inhibitors like methylprednisolone. That's one of the reasons why steroids work. And interferon alpha-2 beta again. And there's other interferons. And then the late 7 to 10 day, the control adaptive humoral immune antibody response. And again, it's the same vitamins or vitamins that are necessary to run that, but there's something else in there, DHEA, that I'm sure you haven't heard about before, that's necessary to get that system to work well. And then hydroxychloroquine, tocilizumab, methylprednisolone, interferon 2 alpha, and convalescent blood plasma for the antibodies, all of which have an effect on that latter stage. So all of those things play a role. And we guide the treatment based upon FMTVDM, that imaging method that I told you that tells you how severe. And
what the actual, how much actual virus you have in your system, correct? You can actually check the levels?
Severity of what's going on and whether it's responding to treatment.
Yeah. Well, I think it's quite interesting to see such a detailed list of how you can affect this treatment on this disease, this virus. And again, I don't see a lot of people. We do have Rob on with us right now.
Hello, Rob.
Transparent Media Truth. We have Sig on. We have Let me just go through everybody who's saying hello. Bubba News is
and
on
Sig,
with us.
I think I've seen you.
Yeah, Sig is great. And they're all asking questions. Sig did have a question for you. He wanted your perspective. He just purchased EMF blockers. He said he bought 2. They're sitting in the corner. He's afraid to open them. He wants some more. He wants some more info on them before opening them. He said he spent $3,000 on them, and he's buying anything he can to protect against this virus, including nano silver. I don't know if you have any thoughts on EMF blockers.
Sig, please return them and get your money back.
Yeah, I hope you're listening, Sig. That's it. That's the end. That's Dr. Fleming's entire response to your EMF question right there.
that tells you how much time I want to spend on something.
Tells you what do you want to do with that. A couple more things here. So Rob wants to know why Dr. Kaufman has not retracted his statement. Rob is obviously, first of all, Rob is who connected us. And,
right. You're welcome, Sig.
We love Rob. We love Sig. Rob said Kaufman isn't addressing the correction. How about Kaufman has, it's been crickets with him on his degree embellishment. He said, shouldn't he be addressing all of this? Or is he going to ignore the degree embellishment and hope we forget?
Well, I suspect he's probably hoping that we'll forget or I'll drop dead, but I've got news for you. I'm fairly healthy. And by fairly healthy, I mean I'm healthy. And I'm not going anywhere. So, yeah, I suppose you have one of two options. You could either get really smart about microbiology, which everything that you've talked about, COVID-19 and this chromosome 8 fantasy with the PCR and the inability to recognize a virus and not knowing how genotyping is done and not understanding PCR. Either you need to get really smart and come up to speed and start articulating intelligently on these fields, or you might want to surrender that argument and say, well, maybe you're not as smart on microbiology. It's your choice.
Well, I think that's a good thing for us to continue on. There's one more question. I had someone stop on today, and he actually sent me a message through my website. His name's Lonnie. I don't know if you know Lonnie, but he says he's been speaking with you. I don't know if it's offline randomly. He's trying to get a conversation between you and Dr. Rowan. Does that make sense? Do you know what this is? Have you heard about this? There's somebody else who's doing different work. There's some sort of connection based on ozone therapy or something like this. Does that make sense at all?
So I want to say I recognize the name. I won't pretend to pull up all the conversations or emails. So my apologies. It's not because I don't consider it important. It's just, honestly, I think I go through.
No, you got a lot going on.
More emails.
Plus, you're also
and I recognize the name Rowan, so I know that somebody had sent me on something on that. I have put out. Well, Lonnie, I think might be from Reno. Is that a yes? No? Yes?
Possibly.
Yes?
He's been sending me messages during this, but I can't read sideways, so hopefully he'll get on. He's afraid to subscribe to YouTube. He's like, just like Sig and everybody else, they don't want their information connected by Google.
so I.
Well, the big question here is he wants to know if I would be open to having the two of you chat about your two different theories. He says that you guys are actually talking about very similar things. I said, of course, I would ask you about it first, and at some point, maybe in the week or two, if he's okay with it, I'll moderate and you guys can chat it out or whatever the...
I was asked to appear on the Today Show a number of years ago, and Dr. Robert Atkins decided behind the scenes that he wanted to be on it, and didn't bother to call me up, just simply tried to push his way onto the program. And I got this very apologetic call from the producer who said, would I mind if he was on the program? And I said, well, A, it's your program. You can have on it whoever you want. B, I'm not sure why he would want to be on it, but C, sure, why not? Bring him on. So,
well, I could tell you're open to conversation, debate, and I thought that it sounds like he thinks, and Lonnie says he is from Reno. It sounds like...
Thank you. I think I do know exactly who you are then. Thank you.
Yeah, from the perspective from what I could read is that he highly respects your work, and he's also very intrigued by Dr. Rowan's work, and he thinks that he's talking about something very similar to what you're talking about, and he thinks the two of you together can collaborate and really get somewhere. Although I think if people read what you have with the FMV TDM? How do I say it again?
FM TV
Well, if people followed that, we'd have more information today than we've had for the last 9 months.
And I think I've expressed to Lonnie and I've expressed to other people who've sent me other people's works that I'm not opposed to investigating anybody's work. The beauty of FMTVDM is it is quantitative and it's objective, and it doesn't care what the human thinks or interprets, because that's not the way it was designed. It's kind of like going out and measuring something. If you put a ruler against something and you measure it and it shows you it's a certain length, that's the length. If you want to come back with the argument and says, well, there is no such thing as a ruler, or you want to say it was 3 times that, you can do that, but it doesn't make it valid. So I always say, look, if somebody is willing to have what they are promoting actually quantitatively evaluated, I'm more than happy to work with them to make that happen. I'm not responsible for whether what they're talking about works or not, any more than I'm responsible for any of these others. And I think I've emphasized more than once that I own no stock in any company. And I made that decision. I made that decision a long time ago. I made that decision when I was in medical school, and I was a member of the American Medical Student Association. And I discovered that the American Medical Association actually had, at one point in time, cigarette stocks in its portfolio. And I decided that it was just too hypocritical. Hippocrates, get it?
Yeah.
Hypocritical to belong to an organization that helped fund itself by something that we were opposed to because of the health consequences. It's kind of like when people ask me about drinking and isn't that good for your cholesterol, and I'll have to say, well, if your argument is that going out and drinking is a drug treatment for your bad eating habits, I can't go on board with you. If your argument is, well, maybe a glass of wine isn't that terrible for you, I'll go, well, neither is 0 glasses of wine, but again, it's not a drug treatment for something that you're doing wrong. If your argument for me is it helps you relax so that you feel less stressed, so that you don't make exosomes. Sorry, but it's just too funny a theory that Kaufman is proposing, that it's the stress that's causing exosomes being released, and that's why everybody's dying. That's what his theory is?
That's what his theory is that
that's part of what he's trying to say, is that, look, everybody's so stressed, the environment's so toxic, that it's because of this stress that everybody is being put under that they're all dying. And so that goes back to Los Angeles. Actually, early this spring, summer, was the cleanest air in the world. And I had to go outside just to experience that, because, I live in LA, and for this to be the cleanest air in the world was certainly something to go out and experience. But, with the air now getting worse as people are getting back and doing more things, then the cases should be going up, not down. So all of this is much to do about fantasy, and I practice science and not pseudoscience. And I practice medicine and not witchcraft. Not to insult anybody out there who's
into witchcraft.
Whatever.
No, but I think
I was actually on a radio station once as a guest host, and I was talking about something, and somebody called me in and just reprimanded me because of the Wiccas, and I was not putting them in their place. And I had to look at the other host across the table and go, what, why am I getting this from somebody calling in that it's like they're accusing me. It's like, can we just shut them off? I mean, they called in, this is stupid. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I do have limits, and it's called stupid.
Yep.
I think I told you that one of my original mentors, when he was asked to explain me to somebody, said, "Richard does not suffer fools gladly."
Well, you know what? You strike me as someone kind of like me, where you don't want to waste your time. You know, I have this old philosophy. When you're young, when you're in high school, I'll take a phone call from a friend who's like, hey, what's up? But when I am an adult, I never want to get a phone call from someone that's like, hey, what's up? Do you know what I mean by that? You know what I mean by that. Like,
I get those calls all the time.
And do you want?
And I'm going, well, you know, my mother's answer to that was the sky.
Mine is like, I think I had a friend do this to me a few times, and I finally said, did you really just call me and say what's up? Like, I want to chat? Like, like, I'm a creator, so I can't stand when people take me out of my zone and I'm wasting a moment. And so when someone calls me and says, what's up to me is I've lost my momentum, I've lost my train of thought, and now I'm having like meaningless conversation that does nothing for my soul and does nothing for my future and my abilities. So I think you're the same way. You're so focused on the task, and I'm type A, whatever, but you're so focused on your work that when people come and they start sidetracking you, it's so annoying. You just want to just leave me alone. I got to finish what I'm working on. And it's like a curse and a gift at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, medicine teaches you to have to multitask, because there's not a day that you go into the hospital that suddenly somebody doesn't throw something at you. So you really have to coordinate it. And one of the reasons for being up earlier is I find the earlier I get up, the more work I get done before the rest of the human race gets there.
That's very true. It's very true.
Which usually at least catches me up to speed for a variety of things. But, you know, I have, I think, a fairly tremendous amount of patience for trying to explain things to people who want to understand. And I have just about zero patience for people who have no interest in trying to understand, expect me to do the work for them, and demonstrate to me that the amount of time I've spent trying to explain something has been wasted because they retain none of that information. And I'm a firm believer in repeating things over and over and over again, especially to students. I'll go, if you've heard it more than once, it might be important. You might want to memorize this.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't understand it, memorize it. I'd prefer that you understand it, because then things make sense. But if you just have to memorize it, for the love of God, memorize it. Somebody's life is going to depend upon this at some time, because while people might think I like to hear the sound of my voice, and I'm not opposed to hearing it, I don't live to hear the sound of my voice. I do have my extended periods of quiet where it's really nice, and I cherish that. But the thing that I will emphasize to students is that good questions, intelligent questions, always welcome. There's a time to ask them. It's not during a presentation. If it wasn't, you might get it answered in the presentation. So go with the flow of what I've worked hard to put forward for you. And if at the end of this you seriously still have a question, by all means bring it up. But do remember, there are such things as stupid questions.
Yeah, and that is things.
And that shows that you just.
Some people say there's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people, but really stupid questions come from stupid people. So I think you're right. You know, there are stupid questions. There are stupid people asking stupid questions, and they stop smart people from making the decisions necessary to progress day by day. And right now what we need is smart people giving us answers, and we have smart people scratching their heads. And they're not listening to people like you that have actually broken down, to your point, they've broken down every possible strategy. They said, look, we know these things work with viruses. You know, here's a question. Someone mentioned this a while back, and it just popped in my head while you were talking about interferon earlier. I don't know if this is the same drug, but I heard something before that someone said the way that COVID treats your body is very similar to high altitude sickness. I call it edema, something like that. Have you heard of something like if you treated it almost like edema, that it could be, I don't know. It's something weird I heard.
So edema is the collection of fluid.
In your lungs.
So I'm sorry?
In your lungs. Like, is that what it is?
No, it's what's called third spacing. So edema is the collection of fluid outside of the cells of your body, and in particular in places where it should not be. So if you've ever seen anybody with puffy ankles because they've eaten too much salt and their blood pressure's high and they have heart failure, those puffy ankles that you press and then it slowly returns, that's edema. Okay, that's the collection of extra fluid. So if that occurs inside the lungs for whatever purpose, and one of the ways in which you get that is an inflammatory response. So you remember in those 12 factors that I talked about that I have on that one website, the final thing is actual direct injury. Okay, so direct injury could be, I take you into the cardiac catheterization laboratory, I stick a needle in your groin to get into the artery, and I put a catheter up to the arteries of your heart. It is possible for me to do direct injury. It's not what I'm planning to do, but there's a 1 in 1,000 chance on the day that I do that, or anybody else, any other cardiologist on the planet. Greater if you've got a bad cardiologist, but if you know what you're doing, you've got a 1 in 1,000 chance on the day of a cardiac cath and the day following, because it can take that long for the reactions to occur, to cause a stroke or heart attack, because you cause tissue damage, cause a blood clot that then goes either to the brain and causes a stroke, or goes to the heart, causes a heart attack, or may go somewhere else and you just simply don't know it. That's just the statistical odds of it. So physical trauma or injury can cause the damage. So high altitude sickness, atmospheric changes that occur suddenly, or chemical changes that occur suddenly. This is toxicology, not terrain theory. It's an actual field of science. Toxicology can cause damage to the lungs. Now that would be more of a chemical pneumonitis or inflammation. And chemical pneumonitis can produce problems with air passage back and forth. And you can see how we actually treat people with that. And again, that would be something that you would want to be very careful about how much air you're giving a person each time that the ventilator works, because you could cause more stretching and more damage.
The forcing, and that's what the ventilators, that's been the big problem with them, right? Is it's been forcing the air when it doesn't need to be forced? Is that what it is?
Well, no, so the ventilator delivers a certain amount of air into the lungs. Each time, you've seen that thing on television where where they show you, it's usually an operating room is what this is. You see the glass tube, and then you see this black accordion type thing go up and down. Okay, that shows you that there's air actually, and actually there's a measurement on the glass that shows you how much that is. That's the tidal volume. Tidal volume is how much air goes in every time the machine works. Okay, and the correct amount for a human being is around 8 to 10 cc's per kilogram body weight. Okay, that's a normal lung getting the amount of air it needs to properly fill it, to get adequate oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. But if you've already got a damaged lung, if it's already inflamed, if it's already been stretched or irritated or damaged, you can't give that amount because it's already damaged. And that's called acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. That's inflammation of the lungs independent of what causes it. Okay? And that has been shown that you can't give the same amount or people die. And so they've worked it out, and it's half as much that you have to do. So the problem with that is that you can't give them as much. So now you give them 5 cc's per kilogram body weight. So instead of giving them 700 cc's of air each time, you might have to give them 350. Or you'll do damage, which will cause more inflammation, which will cause more swelling, which will make it more difficult to get the oxygen in and the carbon dioxide out, which will make it more difficult, which will cause more swelling. You get the picture. It's a bad cycle, and they die.
Yeah.
Okay?
Makes sense.
Well, that wasn't known until the early 2000s. But it's been published multiple times. Now, the problem is that if you don't give them as much as they need, they will do something called overbreathing the machine. So if they can't get as much in each breath, they will try to breathe faster. And that will blow the CO2 off, it will fatigue them, and they will exhaust. And that's when you need to paralyze them to just get it all under control.
Wow. And this is when they put them in the deep coma, right? They put everybody into a coma, essentially? Is that what it is?
If they're going to overbreathe the machine, you have to stop them from doing that, because now they're harming themselves and they're fatiguing themselves even more, making it more challenging for them to recover. So at that stage, you are really stuck with, I now need to paralyze you and make you completely dependent upon the machine. But the problem is that the longer you do that, the more challenging it is to get them off the ventilator. As I frequently tell people, any idiot can put you on a ventilator. You know, once you know how to put a tube in, intubate somebody, and know how to set the machine up, the ventilator, anybody can be put on a ventilator. The trick is getting them off. And that has changed, you know, in my years of practice.
Why is it so tricky?
It's changed multiple times. And independent of the parameters that we use to test people, and you should be testing them every day, but let's be honest, when they got overwhelmed, I'm pretty darn sure they weren't testing them every day. They were just glad they weren't dying and they were on a ventilator. And so the whole focus of treatment has changed from, let's be aggressive. I'm sorry, we're supposed to say assertive, right? I'm going to stay with my training. Let's be aggressive and get them moving forward. Let's get them out of bed. Let's get them in a chair. Let's get them off the ventilator. Let's get the clotting under control. Let's get the inflammation under control. Let's make it at least look like we're trying to keep them alive and get them the heck out of here. And that's not what happened. They just got overwhelmed, and I'm exhausted, and the patients are in, and you see them in the rooms, and they're all lined up on these ventilators, and nobody's doing the things that need to be done to get these patients better. And I know they're overwhelmed. You know, there comes a critical mass point that you go, I can't handle it anymore. And that's when people die.
And, you know, we also, I think, dealt with in the beginning, and again, no offense to any doctors out there, because I know a lot of them worked very hard, frontline, but there were, I heard many that were like, I'm not going in there. They're coding, you know, letting people die because they're so afraid of this disease at the beginning, of this virus at the beginning, that they weren't doing their jobs the way that they were trained to. And they would let people, instead of going in, or they were hurting them with the ventilators, to your point, they weren't properly setting them up. I'm just curious, why is it so hard to take someone off a ventilator?
Because the longer you keep them on a ventilator, the more ventilator dependent they are.
I see.
You're doing the work for muscles, and when you quit using a muscle, what happens to it?
Atrophies.
In the 1960s, we had a tremendous death rate from people after they had heart attacks, because it was a muscle, and it was the muscle that pumped blood around. So they were laid in bed for a week at a time before they would even dare move them, because Lord forbid we actually caused them to have another one. Turned out that was the exact wrong thing to do, because it's a muscle.
Yeah.
It needs to be used. So letting it sit there and not work just made it weaker and weaker and weaker. And then trying to get them up, moving them, the results were not that good. That's why you will see the obsessive compulsive doctors like myself, after post-op from their bypass surgery, the next day going, get them off the ventilator, get them in a chair.
Get them up and
get them off a ventilator, get them in a chair.
You know, it's
get them walking.
It's interesting you say that. My father had double knee surgery years ago, and I just remember I was, you know, maybe I was 25 or something, but I remember, maybe I was 28. I remember I was blown away that the next day they had him walking around. And I remember this, and he said something similar. He's like, years ago, they used to like say, hey, lay down for a month or two, and then you go, and everybody had such a horrible time recovering from this because they didn't push them back to living again and using the body.
The muscles atrophy, there's scarring that goes on, you know, there's more inflammation and scarring that goes on with that. You need to get it up. It's a joint. You need to move it as soon as you can. And
get some action going in your body.
Get some action going in the body. You're an older person. The thing that's going to kill you with a fall is a hip fracture, because that is almost a death sentence for an older individual, because they will sit there, and that promotes blood clotting. When you damage the bone, it tends to promote blood clotting as a consequence. And then they develop these massive things called pulmonary emboli, and we've already talked about that. That big blood clot in the lung will kill you.
That's crazy. And that's something. Are there any symptoms for that type of thing?
For what?
For blood clots or anything like that?
Yeah, you get really short of breath.
You do. Okay, so it's almost
we call it dyspnea, but it's yeah, you get short of breath. Why? Because it stops blood from going to your lungs. Well, what's the purpose of the blood going to the lungs? To get the blood comes out of your heart. It goes into smaller and smaller arteries and then capillaries, and those capillaries surround the air sacs that are called alveoli, and that's where the oxygen gets brought into the blood and the carbon dioxide released. So if you produce a big blood clot to an artery, none of that blood gets to the alveoli, there's no oxygen being taken up and no carbon dioxide being released, and you end up with dead people.
Wow. And as far as lungs are concerned, are there any symptoms if you have a blood clot anywhere else in your body that you could be aware of? Anybody could just say, hey, something feels off?
You get 85% of strokes, as you call them, which is a term I don't like. I'll clear the air on that now. It's called a cerebrovascular accident. Okay, CVA
accident. Okay.
Okay, stroke comes from the old term that you did something wrong and God struck you down.
Really? That's where
it comes from, and that's why it's a stupid term. I'm pretty sure that whatever your deity belief is, cerebrovascular accident. So if you impair blood flow to the brain, either because you have a blood clot or you have a hemorrhage, we divide these into 3 categories. If it lasts up to 24 hours, it's called a transient ischemic attack, or what a lot of people call mini strokes. That's something that you had, and within 24 hours, you're back to normal.
Okay.
FYI, if you have a TIA, transient ischemic attack, a third of the time you're going to have nothing else happen. A third of the time you're going to have another TIA, and another third of the time you're going to have a CVA, cerebrovascular accident.
Okay.
After 24 hours to 72 hours, so 1 to 3 days, if the duration of the symptoms lasts between 24 hours and 72 days, you have what's called a transient ischemic deficit.
Did you say 72 hours or 72 days?
72 hours, I'm sorry. So 40, I did say 72 days the last time.
No, I wanted to make sure. So
24 to 72 hours, so 1 to 3 days. It's a transient ischemic event or deficit. So if it lasts 72 hours and 1 second, you have a cerebrovascular accident, even though at 72 hours and 2 seconds, everything's normal. So the only difference is how long the duration of the symptoms lasts. That's how we classify them.
I see.
So when that happens, and when you have a blood clot in the heart, you have a myocardial infarction, or what you call a heart attack.
So this is what leads to most of these occurrences, what we call strokes, we call heart attacks. It's blood clots most of the time?
Yep, that's right.
And so in general, though, there's no sort of body symptoms that you feel prior to these events, do you? It's just like comes out of nowhere?
You get the signal from the part of your body that's affected when the blood clot has its effect.
So
now,
real time.
With heart disease, because there's, and we don't have time to go into this because heart disease is not what people think it is. It's not a narrowing of an artery, although a narrowed artery will produce heart disease. It's the inability of the arteries to relax and increase their blood flow as needed. And it's the differences in one area of the heart versus another artery in the heart being able to do that equally that signals that chest pain. That's called angina. It's regional blood flow differences, which is exactly what part of what FMTVDM measures.
Interesting.
Okay.
So bottom line is your formula, your algorithm could help in so many, and we talked about this last week. There's so many different not viruses, but actual. I mean, if you're thinking about trying to gauge how sick someone is, and right now you can't do that. You have the ability to gauge how sick someone is with every disease there is.
Yeah, it actually measures everything that's going on.
I just don't understand how we can't get someone to implement this.
Egos.
Sooner.
I mean, everybody's still trying to sell their own thing.
Yeah, you're right. It's the same thing I tell. It's such a minor example, but when I tell you I invented something better than what's out there, and I'm dealing with all the big music companies that want to suppress my idea because it's better, and you have the same thing. You have something better. I'm talking about. There's no way to classify how much better what you have is than what we have. We just know we have inaccurate information, and you could provide accurate information for us as a nation, as a world, and you're dealing with the same backlash as I am as far as getting your product advanced. It's just very frustrating, guys. When you have some way to help this world, and the world doesn't want to be helped because there's money to be made, it's a really weird thing. The evil in this world is so... It's just powerful, and you have to continue to be strong with your light.
Yeah, I've had people that have tried to buy this, and they try to manipulate it to the place that they can get the patent.
Interesting.
But it's kind of like, telling me that it's not important, and then trying to
buy the
work a
patent
deal so that you get the patent is kind of like trying to prove that viruses don't exist by using a virus.
Exactly, yeah.
Well,
you're right. Put your product on the shelf because it doesn't work. Look, we want to figure out how to get this so we could just make it disappear. It's almost like the Charles Pixley thing. Again, we don't know about 714X, but all of the cancer treatments over the last 100 years that have been squashed because they had an effect, getting in the way of the dollar bill, I guess, has been the problem with humanity's existence, or health's existence. It's about continuing. I think it's interesting that this vaccine concept isn't about taking the vaccine. It's about taking it over and over and over, because that's the only way that you could stop the COVID-19, and the amount of dollars they'll be putting in their pockets each time. You have to keep re-upping, And that's something I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it. But, twice a year you got to go and get your vaccine. And this is just the way it is going forward, I don't know if the narrative if that will work fully, because it's not as deadly as they hoped it would be in order to push that agenda. But that is very telling, about the idea of multiple shots, because like you said, a TV goes bad, you don't fix the TV. People just go and buy new TVs because it's $180 for a TV. You spend $250 to fix it. And if we're in a world where it's cheaper to buy new, it's cheaper to get the second vaccine as opposed to, getting rid of the virus, which will never happen anyway, to your point. What is ozone therapy? That's what Lonnie wants to know. Does it work?
Well, it's good to have an ozone layer around the Earth.
That's true. So, it must work. So that must be something to do as well as ozone layer.
I have seen no published papers that prove that ozone therapy works. Now, there are reasons to use high oxygen barometric chambers. And we use those, even where I did my fellowship at, partially because that was Houston and the ocean was right there. So if you had somebody with a deep dive problem, just a second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Then you needed to put them in a hyperbarometric chamber. There is some wound healing benefit for using barometric chambers. But there's the data beyond that is
circumstantial.
Minimal.
There's not much there to it.
No.
Interesting. Well, I would say, Lonnie, if you have any papers, or if you have any other research that you could send to Dr. Fleming, I'm sure he'd love to read it and see if there's any clarification on whether or not this actually does work.
Yeah, it doesn't actually take me too long to go through papers. I get too many already from the journals to review, which is why I've made the comments that none of the research that I've seen on remdesivir or convalescent plasma or hydroxychloroquine have been of the caliber that I would have passed if I were the reviewer. But there's always 2 or 3 reviewers, and if the first 2 reviewers disagree, it always goes to a third reviewer, kind of the tie vote, and then it goes back to the editor, or usually editor-in-chief, to determine whether what the requests are. The vast majority of research papers that I see submitted are so pathetic that I just don't know where people are getting trained at anymore. I know that people have always said that, but I do genuinely feel like it's gotten worse. And part of the problem is I think there's such an expectation from people of a right to publish.
I talk about that. People just push a button now.
They really genuinely believe that they have some legitimate right to be heard, and you know, I'm not somebody who says that people. I'm somebody who believes that if Adolf Hitler were here live today and he started wanting to talk to me, and I could understand him if he didn't speak in German, because I don't speak German. My sons do, but I don't. A little Flemish, but not German. That I would let him talk, because I would have no difficulty in responding to him and refuting his nonsense any more than I would have difficulty refuting the terrain nonsense.
Well, I think that's an interesting perspective. I know some people have used that as a you know, if you were in the same room with someone like that, how would you respond? What would you do? I guess hearing somebody out and telling them how much of an idiot they are and how much of an anti-Semite they are would be something. But I wonder, you know, that was...
Well, I think you just point out the flaws in what they have to say. You don't even have to call them an idiot. I save that for times when it's just like I've given people more than a month to respond and they're continuing to hide. And I mean, this gives you an idea, I guess, of how old I am, and it's not meant to offend anybody, but it's kind of like the little kid hiding behind his mother's skirt. You know, he goes and he punches somebody, and then he runs behind his mom because he knows his mom is going to protect him,
yeah.
And the other kid can't do anything. And then you get the parents involved, and it's like, well, you know, okay, this is nuts. But that's kind of what I get the sense of is you know, people that are coming out and trying to hit people, and then they run behind their mommy's skirt. And I love my mother, by the way, so you know, I appreciate the protection that one gets from their mother. But if you're the person doing the attacking, then you should be ready to deal with that.
It's coming back at you.
A response. Anyway.
Well, listen, this has been another action-packed episode of Real Talk with Dr. Fleming. We've been on for almost 2 hours. We always go. You and I, we just go, Dr. Fleming. I am going to see if I can get Lonnie to connect me with Dr. Rowan, see if there's a chance we can get a conversation over here. I don't know how to reach out to him. I'm going to look into his videos because he's asked me to take a look, which I'm always open to do. I'm always open to learn. For me, I laugh when you start speaking. Sometimes I'm just sitting here. I'm like, okay, someone out there knows what you're saying. I'm like sitting here. I'm like, look, Dr. Fleming, can you please tell the audience, people who have no idea what's going on, you know? But no, you're really filling us all in because there's so much misinformation. And honestly, guys, what you should do with this after you watch it is watch it again. Because a lot of times what I find is on a replay with Dr. Fleming, there's things I pick up on the second time through I didn't hear on the first time. And I love that because I'm constantly learning and I constantly want to get away from all of the misinformation. And Dr. Fleming's helping us with that. And so, like I said, keep watching these videos back. If you have any questions we didn't cover, we could pick it up in the next episode. And you should also subscribe Dr. Fleming on his YouTube page. He's dropping content every single day. And we really, really love having you on the show, Dr. Fleming. It's really so much fun.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. You know, it's funny because I realize I've been putting quite a bit of content on there, and I usually get up thinking, I don't know what I'm going to put on, and then I'll hear something and I'll go, you gotta be kidding. You know, it's like, okay, I guess
it's
today
so funny you
we're
say
going to
that.
talk about this, you know.
It's so funny you say that. I'm the same way. Like I'm an hour or so before the show. I've been doing this for 610 days in a row, and every time I go an hour or two before the show, I'm like, what am I going to make for a face swap today? I'm not even motivated to create something, and then I'll see something just like you said, and I'm like, my mind. I hear one thing I want to say is Trump. Well, I'll just be like, look what Sleep Sofa did today. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I hear or I see the outline for what could be something, and I just go for it. It's like you. It's just then all of a sudden, an hour later, I've got a brilliant piece of content that was nothing. an hour before. And I just love how creativity works and how the mind works, and also how we fuel ourselves. I think we fuel ourselves daily. We motivate ourselves because honestly, the negative world around us is trying to defeat that fire that we have within us. And I'm applauding you on the sidelines every time I see you pop something up there. When you put this whole idea about reporters versus scientists, I think it's a brilliant thing for people to understand. Everyone's speaking right now, but you need to listen to the scientists. You need to listen to the doctors, not the people like me or anybody else who's hearing great information and passing it out there. Go to the source. Go and reach out to Dr. Fleming. Ask him a question if you have it, and get the real answer.
One thing that I know we haven't touched on that I do want to touch on, and it has to do with your positivity theme that you talk about, was the protests that occurred in Europe this last weekend. That is a protest. There were no fires.
Very true.
There were no bullets being shot.
No violence.
There were no windows being broken. There were no things being stolen. The people didn't resist arrest. Most of them, I think, had the attitude of, look, the judge already said this peaceful assembly could occur. I'm being peaceful. It's being filmed. I'm clearly being peaceful. I probably shouldn't say this. There was one white guy who was down on the cement that the police had their knee on his neck.
Really? I didn't see that.
I saw that during one that I was watching Kennedy involved with, and a number of police officers, and one had his knee on the neck of this guy. They picked him up. They walked off. In his case, he walked off. There were other people that just laid there, and so the police had to pick him up, legs and arms and head, and it took several of them out of commission, but they had to carry them out. They were peaceful. They got their point across. It's clear that the police had been told they had to do something, so they did. As they got longer and longer and longer, I didn't see anything that suggested that criminal activity or violent activity was occurring.
Yeah.
They were protesting to try to protect their civil rights, and I think that they successfully did that. And there is a perspective in Europe and other countries that the United States is a very immature young country.
Oh, yeah.
With behaviors of a very immature child.
It's so funny you say that. I call it the juvenile society. We're a juvenile society.
The behaviors of a people that want to maintain their civil rights not only requires them standing up for those civil rights, but a recognition of how it can best be accomplished. Gandhi talked about a passive resistance. If you're convinced that your message is right, you keep repeating your message. The way to get people to listen to your message is not to attack them, not to hurt them. Because if you hurt somebody, they're going to become defensive, and you have lost every reason for the person being attacked to listen to you. It's very hard to do that. But if you're not being attacked, imagine the police officers that were carrying off the protesters in Berlin and London this last weekend. I don't think they went home and said, these lousy, pathetic people. I think they went home with, yeah, we arrested some people. No, I'm not hurt. They're not hurt. They're going to go through this process. Not the process they wanted, but they decided it was important enough for them to speak out. Remember, I said, you can tell what someone stands for by what they're willing to stand against.
That's true.
That's my motto. One of my mottos. I fervently believe in that, but that is not accomplished with violence. Violence begets violence.
Yep.
I know it's challenging if you feel like your rights are being taken away to not feel a certain, I've had enough of this. But if the message is to think about it from somebody else's perspective, then those protesting also must think about it from the other person's perspective. You know, you can't have it both ways. You can't say viruses don't exist because I have a virus to prove it. You can't say you have to listen to my perspective, but I don't have to listen to your perspective. You can't get people to listen to you by shouting at them and screaming the F word. And I think you recognize I'm not somebody who believes in vulgarity.
Yeah. And you know, it's almost the old, you can't have your cake and eat it too, you know? And I think that's a very important leave off here is in general, what I saw yesterday, what really frustrated me is I saw some young man trying to get home to his family. And there was 7 or 8 BLM women standing in front of his car yelling obscenities at him. And there's a guy filming the whole thing laughing at this guy. The guy's crying. He's like, I need to get home.
Yeah, I think I saw this.
And the guy's like, why won't you let me leave? He's like, you have a better chance of getting out of your car, and that's how you can get home. We're not letting you go. You're done. You're here. This guy's crying. I don't know if his wife was pregnant. Who knows? He needed to get home. They wouldn't let him go. And it frustrates me when I see this. It's, again, you want to protest and you want to get your point across. That's one thing. But when you start affecting the lives of the people who are just trying to live, and you start creating problems, to your point, there was just such a peaceful protest. It was a positive gathering. And yeah, there's a lot of positive stuff going on, but the Antifa of the United States are destroying all those positive gatherings, all the positive protests, and they are, it's the poisonous fruit. And look, I don't know. I know the end game is they'll continue to try to say it's the right wing. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. I saw a guy today drive, this is just super quick because I don't want to keep you, but there's a guy driving by my house today. I'm walking my dog, and he goes, do you live here? Or do you live in the street? And I said, yeah, I do. And he goes, oh, my son and his wife just moved 2 doors down. They have 3 kids. And I said, I do too. And we start chatting, and we're talking the age differences. He's like, oh, that's great. My grandson and your daughter are in the same age. And then we start chatting about COVID-19 for some reason. It came up. He must have been 75, 80 years old. And I jokingly said to him, I said, yeah, but didn't you hear the new news? I said, I think it's gone. And I started laughing. And I said, no, I'm just kidding. This is something we're still dealing with. He goes, yeah, I know. And somehow we got onto the topic of Trump, you know. And he goes, look, I think you and I may be on the same page here. He's like, look, I'm just looking for a straight shooter here, someone who's going to say how things are going. He's like, I can't stand what I'm seeing with all this stuff in the streets. And then I just simply said, what do you think about them saying that it's the right-wingers doing this? And he just shook his head and he goes, nobody believes that. And what I thought was very interesting is the way he couched the entire thing about, I think we're on the same side here. He was very nervous. And it gets me back to my original theory is that most people who would support the president of the United States, and I know you're down the middle, I've considered myself down the middle, but I honestly can't vote for a sleep sofa, and he doesn't know who he is anymore, and that's just scary to me. And if he did, I would question it. I'd be like, oh, who do I vote for? And then I'd still look at what Trump did over the last 4 years. But my philosophy on this is if everybody like this man, 75 years old, are saying, look, there's a silent majority, just like there was in 16 of people who are afraid. Like, think about it this way. Someone calls you Dr. Fleming and they're like, hey, I just wanted to know if you'd be voting for Biden this year. I'm pretty sure whether you were or not, you'd be like, yep, yeah, I'm voting for Biden because I don't want BLM outside my door. I don't want someone protesting and saying, hey, we got another Trumper and shooting me or something. It's so stupid that these people can't respect just a belief, and it doesn't have to be the same as yours. But the world we're living in is really, really scary right now.
Actually, I inform people who ask me who I'm voting for that it's none of their business.
That's the better way of doing it, guys. You know what? Tell people to go pound sand. It's not your responsibility. Go and vote for yours. It's the same thing with this vaccine. If someone comes up to you, and I don't know if you agree with this, Dr. Fleming, but if someone comes up to me one day and says, did you take your vaccine? Or we won't let you. Did you take your vaccine? Oh, you did? Okay, good. Then you don't need me to take mine. You have it. You are protected. You know, right? Wouldn't that be the case? If someone has their vaccine, why do they care if you got yours? Can you get, I mean, you're still getting it. We know that. I mean, everybody keeps thinking, well, if once I get the vaccine, I don't get the COVID. You're still getting it. But the idea that you'd force a vaccine on somebody can they force it on us? I mean, they forced us to mask. Can they force us to all vaccinate?
I think if it's a public health issue and the people don't know any better and they don't have the intelligent information to respond to it, which is part of what I'm trying to do here, is to get this out to people.
Absolutely.
Then I would, the attorney in me would argue yes.
Wow. And that's scary.
I would argue that. I mean, I would argue that case if I had to, because attorneys do hypotheticals, right? That's what they live for.
Yeah.
I think. And which is, can I win the argument? I mean, it's not whether you're right or wrong. It's can you win the argument, which is kind of why that's my dumbed down degree. Because physics is like a pure science. Sorry for the rest of them. I know you're good scientists. And medicine is, people die. And law is, it's just whatever they want it to be and who can argue it best. And the person who gets to argue it best is the one who's on top in the system. So the judges get whatever they want, whether it's right or not. And whoever gets close enough to them usually gets to win, which is, the difference between reality and fantasy. So I think the argument would be if you could demonstrate it's a public health issue, but see, by explaining to people, I'm doing the Galileo approach, and I think we've gone through this before, which is Galileo got put under house arrest, not because he said the earth went around the sun.
But he said for them to use their mind, to use their own
But he
judgment.
looked at the people and he said, look, this is what you need to know. You need to look at this. You need to think about the Earth's rotation. You need to look at the moon. You need to look at the stars. You need to look at the planets you can see, like Mars and Venus. You can get that up there near the moon at the right times. You can see the sun. If you think about it, you too will be able to figure out that the Earth goes around the sun. So as soon as the people listen to what I'm saying, as soon as the doctors pay attention to the inflammothrombotic part and using FMTBDM to measure, the deaths can stop. Once people understand the issue about the vaccine, that it doesn't prevent the infection, number one. Number two, it doesn't really save time because it's the same amount of time, roughly 4 days, between either antibodies kicking in from a vaccine response or your innate T-cell cytotoxic response at 4 days. It's the same time span. Once people get that, then the response to that can be, I don't need a vaccine. My body is going to do the same. It's going to take the same amount of time whether you give me a vaccine or not. This is not like tetanus, where if I'm not covered with the antibodies to begin with, I'm going to stop breathing because of the toxin.
Interesting.
It's a completely different scenario. You're not preventing me from getting COVID-19. So, and you're not saving me time. You're just giving me another period of a bad experience by making me go through the reaction to your darn vaccine, as opposed to just going through the reaction by getting the actual virus. So now I get to go through it twice, and plus every other time I get the vaccine.
Yeah, and they've adjusted your genes, right, with the RNA. Once that thing gets in the system, doesn't it affect you some way?
See, that's a hypothetical. And all I want to respond to is whether there's even an argument for having the vaccine. If there's no argument for having the vaccine, everything else is moot.
Yeah. No, I think you. This is what we should focus on in the next conversation: is why is there a vaccine and the pros and cons of a vaccine. And efficacy, all that stuff, so we could prove to the world that a vaccine is pointless for COVID-19. I think that would be the perfect real talk, actually, is to detail why a vaccine is pointless for COVID-19 and to have that just be a real talk on itself. What do you think?
Well, this is what I would suggest. We do it 5:30 1 week from today. 5:30 p.m. Pacific time 1 week from today, and you can let people know, and everybody listening can let people know, and we'll try to get people to pay attention to your program. The other thing I want to mention is I think you should seriously consider having Kevin W. McCarran on. He's a PhD from Japan. Kevin is a neurobiologist. He is very tuned in to the consequences of COVID-19 as far as the limbic system. I believe that's where he thinks its most effect is, and the behaviors that are seen by people. He's spot on target with this. He's very intelligent, very articulate, is a real scientist, has a real degree, not a pretend one. And not pretending to be a microbiologist. He actually understands how to do PCR. I think he's done some of those. He has some experience with PET imaging, like positron emission tomography imaging, because he and I talked about the PET image he has on his wall in his office, an area that I do research in as well. And so you'll be getting a real scientist perspective on that. And so I think you should have him on the program. I'm happy to have a conversation with the other person that you were talking about. Wonderful. But I think 1 week from today at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, we should schedule a discussion about vaccines and the pros and cons of having a COVID-19 vaccine. I'm
going to create an event for that today, so we have a full week of people seeing it, and let's get as many people in as possible. Now, we didn't discuss this, but 2 out of the last 3 days I was censored on Facebook. They said that I was providing false information about COVID-19. What was kind of interesting about this, Dr. Fleming, is the 2 days that they censored me, I didn't even mention the word COVID-19 once. I played music all night, and we played Trump face swaps. So they censored me, I think, because we're starting to scratch the surface here. And I think I'm scaring them a little bit, hopefully. But it is a little concerning that their blanket statement, the show as a COVID-19 false facts, when we didn't even discuss it. Tonight we talked about it at length. So there's a pretty good chance they're going to censor us. But we're still live.
It's interesting because Dr. McCarran was talking on his program. It might have been this morning, but it could have been yesterday. And he was talking about the difference. One of the differences between he and I is that I am clearly the orthodox representative of science. And that's what you get with 52 years worth of research. Is if you literally are serious about doing it and you've done it for 52 years, you just simply don't flinch when nonsense is shown to you. You insist that people present science to support their statements, and you present the science of the statements that you make. And then you just look at people and go, I'm sorry, I can teach it to you, but I can't understand it for you.
Yeah.
But you cannot tell me it's not valid because it's published in peer-reviewed medical journals. And that determines the validity of science.
Well, I would also, and this is just I'm reaching on this one, but I would say that how you were trained and the fact that you did have to go through the Dewey Decimal System in order to find paper, you know what I mean? Like, this is so simple now for scientists, for doctors, in order to find information, they just go into Google. You are used to a time where you had to work for your research. So I feel like when someone says, hey, you got to go research, you're not like, oh, geez, I got to go do work. Like, you like that. It's kind of like part of what keeps you going.
Yeah.
And other people are like almost, and I don't know if it's true, but other scientists may have a little bit of laziness because the information's been so easy. The newer scientists, the information's so easy to get to. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the more detail you have to do and the more you dig out of things and the more you realize, like the inflammation cardiovascular disease theory, that followed a couple decades of just talking about cholesterol alone. When you have to sit down, I didn't have to. But if you're a scientist that sits down and sorts that out and you suddenly start getting these epiphany moments where you see things connect, that is that will drive you to determine that you want to do it right. Because the last thing you want to do is to be a sloppy scientist or a sloppy physician, because you get bad outcomes. And then I don't know how you find your way back out of the forest when you have no idea how you got into the mess that you were in to begin with. Where, you lay out these thought processes, and I have a lot of people that go, I don't follow you. You're on inflammation over here, and you're on heart disease here, and you're on cancer over here, and you're on imaging over here, and you're on COVID-19 infectious disease over there. And I have to go, no. If you actually followed me, if you bothered to read my work, you would see that there is a pattern, a straight line that goes through here. And a scientist that looks at that goes, wait a minute, what I'm actually measuring is tissue differentiation based upon regional blood flow and metabolic differences, which equals heart disease, cancer, infection, you name it. That is what distinguishes these things. The only thing after that is what is the very specific causative agent that produces this change in metabolic function and regional blood flow difference.
And
that's it. It's all connected.
Everything's connected, guys. That's why we need your test in order to figure out what we have. Right? I mean, we still have to help. We have to help Dr. Fleming get in front of the right people in order to show them, the way to the light. I mean, how are we in 2020 just still working with the old? Like, I don't understand when someone creates something better, why you're just not, look, we can now provide the world with the information we've been hoping to have forever. And it's not, and I think the interesting thing is the cost for the test as opposed to what they're currently using. You said it's something like 50 times more for what they're currently using as opposed to yours. It would be like something like $500 a test as opposed to $5,000 a test. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's 500 versus 5,000, and that's for the cardiac study. But I look at something. This test, FMTVDM for COVID, can be done. It's not just one type of camera. It's applicable to every type of nuclear camera and the isotopes. It just has to be worked out for what any facility has to then calibrate their equipment. And this is a study that takes 20 minutes to do.
20 minutes for the test.
20 minutes for this type of test.
And is it something that you get the information immediately, or does it take like time in order to be diagnosed?
Well, the reality is that the technologist could do it right there and get the results right away, but it is more efficient for the technologist to do all of the patients one after another and collect all the data, and then go back down to the lab and just pull up each patient and get the results.
I see.
And then shoot them all out at once. So it's same day stuff.
But you can do it all in one motion essentially. You can
right.
Take care
but
of
if you only had one patient doing it, it would take you another 5 minutes to process it.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think we have to continue that conversation for sure, but I'm interested in getting into the vaccines a little more on why we're even still talking about a vaccine. And I think what we need to do is dispel that rumor once and for all. Because I heard Fauci say it again, that once we're vaccinated, you won't get the disease. He keeps saying that. And that's not accurate, right?
That shows a significant lack of understanding. That is, I don't know if he's playing it like people who talk about blood thinners, and I say there is no such thing as a blood thinner. We're not adding water to your blood. We are decreasing the clotting tendency of your blood. It is not a blood thinner. Your blood isn't more watery. So I don't know if that's the mistake being done, but anybody selling the concept that a vaccine prevents you from getting what you're vaccinated for is either selling you something or on something, or both.
And so we know for sure that Fraud-She's trying to sell us something. He's not on something. And he's been doing this from the beginning, guys. This isn't like a slip up. He wouldn't say the word zinc the other day. They brought that up multiple times. From the beginning, he said, once we get a vaccine, you just have to take it. We could do the tests later. But then hydroxychloroquine, he was so anti-hydroxychloroquine. Instead of giving things, I think it was 2009 or 2004, his research team came out with that paper about hydroxychloroquine for SARS-1, that it was the only thing that stopped the ACE2 inhibitors.
Yeah, I think he said it was chloroquine, but yeah.
Chloroquine, okay. So, but for him to be so anti-hydroxychloroquine when they had a study that said it was so effective against SARS-1, and this is just the next step because it's been modified, you'd think that he'd at least say, you know what, we should look into that one. And he never did that, never told us to boost our immune systems, although I know you're saying your immune systems may not need to be boosted because they're not acting correctly. And that's an interesting thing. I love the way you explain that, because it almost reminds me of like a young kid, like dating a girl first time, doesn't know how to kiss her. Like there's just a lot of stuff going on at once. And as you age, you get more confident. You start understanding how your body works. And these are things that your immune system's almost the same way. As it ages to the right, almost like a fine wine, to the point where it's like, okay, I'm at my best right now. Anything comes along, I'm swiping it away. And I'll know how to react to a virus or know how to react to X, Y, or Z. So that's a great way of explaining that, because I don't think medically people would understand an immune system not working properly by age, young and old, how you could be considered just misfiring, so to speak. So I loved that. Really great way of explaining that. Because, you're so scientific, my friend, that sometimes you got to dumb it down for us. And you did that great by saying, yeah, you're an old man or a young. So I love that. And I really appreciate, like I said, just keeping us on the right path here, because it's a scary world. The misinformation, disinformation, it's an election year, and you're fighting the good fight to try to keep people sane.
Yeah.
That's the best thing. That's the best way I could say it. You're trying to keep people sane through all this, because my new thing is not to say stay safe to people. I stay sane. Like, look, stay sane. Forget stay safe. We're all staying safe. Let's be honest. I wear my mask when I have to. I mean, I'm staying away from people. I'm staying safe. I want to stay sane. So I feel. Anything to say at the end here, Dr. Fleming, on the way out?
Nope. It's my pleasure to be here again. Thanks for the invitation. I'll see you next Monday, and we'll talk about vaccines. And I would reach out to Kevin McCarran.
Yeah, do you know him?
Yes.
Would you be able to maybe let him know that because I'll reach out to him, but he may be like, who the hell is this guy? But maybe you could tell him I'd love to have anybody on this program, but specifically since you mentioned him, I'm going to reach out to him. I'll touch base with you later to make sure I get the right contact so I can reach out. But Perfect. Thank you for that, because I think again we have to continue to point people to this platform and get them on the air and see what happens.
Yeah, I think intelligent, articulate information is necessary. When I listen to the CDC and WHO and NIH and NIAID and HHS and the FDA, and none of them are on the same page, I really want to say, you know what, guys, there's a room over there. Why don't you all go meet in it and figure out what the heck you're going to tell us before you do whatever it is that you think you're doing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because this is not about getting airtime. And I sometimes get the feeling that this is about getting airtime. And I'm not certain if people are somehow needing stroked or a pat on the back or some type of affirmation. But if that's what they're doing, and I can appreciate that, my only comment is then do something worth being affirmed or patted on the back for. Don't
be a taker, be a giver.
If you can't make a statement that can hold up for more than 24 hours, maybe don't make the statement.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because we're living in the 24-hour news cycle, right? Everything that happens, it's a 24-hour shift, and then, okay, tomorrow it's a whole new 24-hour shift of this. Yeah, it's just... And the problem is the good stuff isn't coming to light. And that's probably why I shut off the negatube. I want to tune in and hear something good. I want to hear what's happening with this nation positively. And for 4 years, they've had to try to manipulate the system in order to get to November and try to get this guy out of office, that all the good stuff that happened, no one's heard about. None of it. I was blown away when I read some of the stuff that Trump did, and I actually support the fact that he's pushes for America first. I didn't know any of this stuff until I read it. And I've been supporting him for a little bit of time now. I didn't watch politics for 400 days, but since I saw the State of the Union address, I've been saying, wow, it's pretty clear who wants America to do well and who wants to destroy America. And again, down the middle or not, I just clearly could see a party that's burning America right now, and then a party that's just like, are you kidding me? Yeah, okay, whether he gets in or not. I would never see this thing that happened last year where people say, it's not my president. Like, if sleep sofa Joe gets, I'm going to be like, that's my sleep sofa. It is what it is, but I'm not going to cry in my beer. And I'm just going to say, look, taxes are going up. I'm not going to be happy about this. But what do you do about it? You know?
Well, hopefully this issue with COVID-19 falls on the shoulders of scientists, physicians like myself to address.
Yeah,
and it's our obligation to look at the science and to bring it forward and to make people aware of it so that what has happened to 2020 so far does not need to repeat itself, because this is not what's happened in 2020 so far is not a scenario that demonstrates a viability for the human species on this planet.
No. This is destruction of our species, essentially, is what I mean.
So everybody needs to step back, listen to facts and information, and literally start trying to work with other people instead of forcing other people into the mode that they want them to be. And I think that once we literally take that approach, there's a real potential for a benefit. I mean, this is a painful but necessary lesson on health and wellness and how to treat other people and how to share information intelligently. And recognize not only the benefit of giving that information to other people, but the benefit of being able to give that information to other people and to receive correct information from others to help us all move ahead. And Absolutely. It's not just a matter of whether we're making the United States move ahead, it's the entire planet that needs to move ahead. And we're only going to do that by an intelligent exchange of facts and information versus opinions and attacks.
That's true. That's absolutely true. I like your idea of Zoom it. Like, get these people in one Zoom call or something and like, hey guys, you're the specialists here, we're the specialists there. Let's sit down. What have you figured out? What have we figured out? And let's get to the bottom of this together, because you're right. It should be a unified front worldwide, and it's just everybody just going in a different direction. And that's really a weird thing. But listen, tremendous episode again, 2 hours, 26 minutes. I will send this to you this evening. I think I still have time where I'll be able to download, send this over to you so you can start dropping some clips. And next Monday, guys, don't forget, Dr. Fleming will be back. We're going to tackle vaccines. Well, not tackle vaccines. We're going to point out the reasons why it's pointless to actually be creating a vaccine for COVID-19. And we'll go through pros and cons, okay? Pros and cons. Maybe there are a few pros. I doubt it. But we're going to look into it. Next Monday. Dr. Fleming, pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I love it.
Have a good evening.
Have a great evening, okay? I'm going to stick around for one more minute, guys, and play you something. Dr. Fleming, have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Awesome. Very cool, guys. How great is it to have Dr. Fleming on for a third time? Next Monday, we're going to make it a fourth time, and we're going to get into vaccines and why they may work with other things, but they are definitely not going to work with COVID-19. Now, I want to play you guys something very quickly. We've been on for 2 hours, 26 minutes, so this is